Hi everyone. Today I just wanted to show off a custom crystal chamber that I've been working on for my MPP 2.0 Hilt here from Corband. I think I'm going to be starting the actual wiring and install process pretty soon. But I think once I get into it, you might not be able to see much of the chamber, and it certainly won't be apart like in this manner. So I figured I'd do a quick little overview of what I've been doing so far here, and then I think once I get everything wired up, I'll shoot another video, but this one will be specific for the crystal chamber here that I've been working on. So the thought behind this was really taking a combination of hard disk drive parts, MHS parts from the Custom Saber Shop, as well as these brass fins that I got from Darklyte Customs on Etsy, basically Victor's shop. So I guess let's get started. Basically the foundation here at this point is this particular piece. This was part of the disc platter assembly, so I was able to extract this. I opened up the hole here. I think I'm going to use that for some wire pass-throughs. Open up a couple more holes here, and then the way it's going to fit into the hilt, this will slide in, and there will be a wire passage here for some switches. So I cut basically a couple notches out of there. This particular silver piece here is it started off as a blank chassis disc from the Custom Saber Shop, which I drilled some holes here, and you can kind of see at this point. Let's do a quick walkthrough. So let's see if it'll focus. Focus. There we go. So as you can see here, there's 3 screws that I'm using to attach this piece here to this particular chassis. So this chassis piece here has hard disk drive holes drilled into it, as well as the MHS standard holes that attaches the fins and the rest of the chassis together. So what I did here, let's see if this looks better, as part of the screw assembly here that attaches everything, I kind of tapered the end up a little bit to get some detail there. Let me see if I can bring the light over a little bit more, just to give it a little bit more of a interesting element there instead of just a blunt end. Same thing with this particular threaded section piece there, a little different kind of nub at the end, and then this guy here, which was a longer piece. So interesting thing about this particular bolt, I guess you could say, it was stainless steel. It was the only one I could find at the store that I had access to. But it was stainless steel, so this really was kind of difficult to kind of remove the threading and make it all work out. But basically just used a drill press with a decent set of files, and I was able to kind of get rid of the threading and kind of put some of these accent notches and elements into it. Anyhow, moving on to this particular piece, this started off as just a pure brass piece. Actually, it had threaded ends on both ends, but in my particular application that did not work out well. So I basically cut off one end of the threads and just tapered the end. So I thought that turned out nice. This little guy here was just another little greebly that I kind of customized out of a 440 rod, and then these little screws were 440 nuts that were shaved off, rounded off, so I think they kind of work out well. This particular little spacer I got from a site on Etsy. There's a bunch of sites that sell these little spacers and whatnot, but it seems kind of cool. And then of course these are the Darklight Fins. There's 6 of them, perfectly machined. Certainly had to clean them up a little bit in terms of the finish, just to get the finish that I wanted. It does come in brass, but I did weather this. I'll talk about the weathering in a second, but these fins are absolute perfect. And I actually had tried cutting and drilling my own fins, and that was just such a pain. I spent so much time on that, and it just wasn't worthwhile. So if you guys have a chance, highly recommend getting a set of these fins from Victor. And I actually have 2 sets. I have another set that I'm saving for a different project, but they're very well made, and made this installation, this chamber, much easier to do. This piece right here is started off as just a copper tube, which I'm using as a wire passage. There's another copper tube here, it's that center piece there, that I'm using as a wire passage as well. So this little detail here, this U-shaped detail, that is also copper. And I think with a lot of the crystal chambers you see these days, there's these radiator elements and heat sink type properties that we associate with crystal chambers, so thought that was pretty nice. I actually did modify Victor's fins a little bit, so I drilled the holes for these copper rods, as well as the center hole for the wire passage rod that goes down the center. So yeah, I think that turned out well for this particular application. Let's see here. Then this clear piece is just a standard MHS, I think a 3 to 2 hole disc. And then this last piece down here is another hard drive component that I got from the hard drives that I had. And then a couple more greeblies here, or say 440 nuts that I was able to use. So in terms of weathering, I used a combination of aluminum black from Birchwood Casey and brass black. So everything here on the silver elements, that was aluminum black. Same thing with this particular part here. Now, one thing to note on some of the hard drive components, it's really a pretty hardy material. By itself, it will not take the weathering, so you do need to sand it down, kind of remove some of the sheen from the surface before the aluminum black will take. But it will take, and it actually does quite nicely of a job. So I was actually pretty pleased with how that turned out. For the copper elements and the brass elements, all of this was very bright to begin with, but I did not like how shiny it was for this being a Vader hilt, and I also didn't want it too dark either. So played around with it a little bit, thought it ended up being decent. I thought I'm actually quite pleased with it. It still has a little bit of a brass sheen to it, but you could tell it is much more of a weathered look, and actually quite satisfied with how that turned out. It was my first time using brass black and aluminum black in this particular application, so actually quite pleased how that turned out. So I think that pretty much covers that part. What I eventually will do, and you can see I have 2 crystals here that I've cut. Talk about this a little bit. So this metal piece here are also hard drive elements. I think they held the platters in place. But anyways, I was able to extract them out, tap the hole, that's a 440 hole, got my crystal, shaved them down to fit the hole. So eventually they'll go in there with that set screw. Same thing with this particular crystal. So at the end of the day here, and I'm still kind of playing around with this, I might go with a single crystal, I'm not quite sure yet, but in essence this will poke through there like that, and then at least with this particular plan, I'll have this one coming in from the top side, so it'll look something like that. But obviously this piece will be buried in the middle there. So I haven't completely decided how I want that to look yet. Anyhow, and then moving on to the rest of the chassis here. So in theory, this will fit something like that. Let's see if the camera will focus. So this part here will be where I have my Nano Biscotti version 4. It will sit right on top there. I've tried to put some elements in here where it would mimic Vader's chest piece. So I basically sanded your regular MHS chassis disc, acrylic disc down, and I was able to get this kind of matte finish, which I thought turned out pretty good. And then the silver was just a aluminum washer that I cut down to kind of give a little bit more of a design element there. So the Nano Biscotti board will sit right on top, no metal contact, it'll be protected well. I had to open up some of the grooves on the side, so it'll literally slide in, but then you won't be able to pull out. You can see here I have more hard disk elements. This actually fits perfectly into the space where the battery is. So that's kind of neat. I have one on each side, and then I have some brass tubing from K&S Engineering, where I did weather and darken with brass black. Basically that will be my wire run for the speaker, recharge port through here, and then I think I'm going to have the SD card facing this way over here, and then the wire end of the business end of the board will be over here. But I was trying to avoid having exposed wires. These parts were brass before, just hit them with a little bit brass black. I think they darkened up nicely. So at the end there will not be any visible brass as part of this chassis. So I think that'll go well with the whole Vader theme. And then of course here I need to throw in a little bit of red just to get that Sithy-ness into this chassis. And what this was basically the same. It was a, let's say, Nano Biscotti chassis disc, which I cut down the center. Same thing with this. This was a full circle before, cut them off. But I didn't like the empty space in here, so basically cut that off to fit this particular section of the recharge port discs. And basically it was a pretty decent fit. I think I had to trim down the center one a little bit thinner just to fit, but I think that covers up that piece a little bit better. I'll probably throw in a LED somewhere in there. I think that'll light up everything pretty good. So yeah, and then this will house I think, what is it, a 28mm Vecco based speaker and everything else. So hopefully this will come together pretty soon. I'm pretty excited to be able to get to this particular point. This chassis obviously is, I think, the center of this particular build. Absolutely pleased with how things have turned out so far. Took a lot of work, and this is my first chamber of its kind. Well, my first custom chamber anyhow. What am I saying? But I think it was a nice blend of the different types of parts I was able to use, and gives it a little personal touch. So yeah, that's pretty much it for now. So stay tuned for the full build. Hopefully that will come together in the next week or so. All right, take care, guys.